Okay, we're officially recording. And everyone can hear me okay? Okay, I got some thumbs up. Thank you. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today to celebrate our second event in recognition of Careers in Aging Week here at Rutgers 2022. I am not going to lie, I just had to check to make sure I had the right year. What a couple years it's been. Careers in Aging Week is a campaign created by the Gerontological Society of America, otherwise known as GSA, and that is focused on bringing awareness and excitement around careers in aging. My name is Dr. Lauren Snedeker, and I'm a faculty member at the School of Social Work, and I also coordinate the MSW Certificate in Aging and Health at this school. So now I would like to formally introduce you to today's panelists. Our event today is focused on different professionals and career paths that you might want to consider, and we hope that you do, that all engage and sort of involve older community members, older clients. So as I sort of read off our panelists and their names and their experiences, if panelists don't mind just giving a wave to just introduce yourselves. So first, I would like to welcome Quinn Dimena, who's an architect, senior project manager, thank you, Quinn, at the Speisel. Am I saying that right? Speisel?
Speisel.
Speisel. Excuse me, Speisel Architectural Group. Thank you for joining us, Quinn. And Quinn will be starting us off. We also have Dr. Emily Baylock, who's an assistant professor in the Occupational Therapy doctorate program, has practiced occupational therapy for 15 years, primarily in the geriatric rehab, home modification, and aging in place sectors, a BS and MS in occupational therapy from Thomas Jefferson University, and a PhD in translational health science from George Washington University. Dr. Baylock is a veteran, an age-friendly community researcher, and the co-founder of a startup tech company, called UseLink, where older adults can use tech to promote and maintain independence. Thank you, Dr. Baylock. We also have Peter Badgley. I'm sorry, Peter, if I just pronounced. I was trying to say all the letters in your last name.
I think you're the only one that's ever gotten that right. So thank you.
That makes my day. Thank you. Peter is the co-founder and COO of Upside Home. Upside Home was founded on a simple premise: to elevate the quality of life for older adults by offering a streamlined, all-inclusive apartment experience. Peter wants all parents, grandparents, and older loved ones to live an easy, healthy, and stress-free life. Peter holds a BS in finance from Providence College and he's actually joining us from Florida, where he lives in Boca Raton with his wife, Erica. So thank you so much, Peter, for joining. And last but not least, of course, we have Dr. Joan Carpenter, who's assistant professor at the University of Maryland School of Nursing, Organizational Systems, and Adult Health. Thank you, Dr. Carpenter. Dr. Carpenter is an assistant professor at the University of Maryland School of Nursing, a health scientist at the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, and a geriatric and palliative nurse practitioner whose practice focuses on the post-acute and long-term care nursing home setting. Educated and trained as an advanced practice nurse and scientist, she has over 20 years of experience working with older adults with serious and complex illness. Dr. Carpenter collaborates with nursing homes and interdisciplinary health professionals to implement evidence-based practices, test complex interventions, and conduct pragmatic studies that support high quality care. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We have such a stellar lineup of folks who are really just experts in the field of aging across many different settings, and we're just so glad that you're all here. And with that, I'd like to invite Quinn to go ahead and kick us off, speak about his work. Thank you so much. So you can go ahead and share your screen, and I will stop talking.
All right, is my screen up?
You are good.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you, Lauren. And good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining me in Careers in Aging Week at Rutgers University. I'm Quinn Dimena, and I am an architect based here in Camden, New Jersey. Also, where Rutgers is, right across the street from me. I'm in the New Jersey office of Spiesel Architectural Group. We're a multi-focused architectural firm, but I've been focused on senior living for over 30 years. My work includes long-term care, short-term care, rehab, assisted living, personal care, life plan communities, or what we used to call CCRCs, independent living, active adult, and other variety of typologies of living for older people. One of the interesting things I learned very early on in my career, particularly because I came out of doing hospital work originally, was to change my language from a patient to a resident. That was one of the early things I learned. And I think it is indicative of a mindset of people that work in senior living, that the people you're working with are not patients. They're in their homes, wherever they are, whether it may even be a nursing home. Anyway, I'll be talking about my work, my career path, and why I enjoy what I do. First, I'd like to start with what does an architect like me do day in, day out? Well, I do a lot of very different things in the course of my day. That variety is what I really enjoy. I could be doing things like drawing, many platforms for drawing, such as computer drawing, or doing modeling, literally modeling on my computer, or I may be even hand drawing. Sometimes I use rendering systems, Photoshop, for example. Some of my activities are doing marketing, writing proposals and contracts, project management, leading other staff members in the office, or coordinating between other members outside the office, consultants, working with owners, contractors, and some really exciting stuff like specification writing. I started my education and career path to becoming an architect in senior living. Wasn't really a linear process, wasn't a linear path. My father was an immigrant and a carpenter who built colonial revival homes along the Philadelphia main line. Growing up, I was fascinated by my father's building trade, and I even had the idea of becoming an architect as a way of being in construction, but not really needing to work as physically hard as my father did. I also like to draw and paint. However, my immigrant family didn't think I should be an architect. They thought I should be an engineer. That's what they understood to be successful. So off I went to art school, where I explored painting, illustration, photography, sculpture, all sorts of things, but came back, found my way back, fortunately, because University of the Arts at the time had a architectural studies program. So I did finish up at University of the Arts in the architectural studies program, but this was not a professional degree program, and I knew I needed to become a licensed architect. I needed a professional a degree. During the time I was in art school, summer breaks, I continued to work in a variety of construction company projects and activities. But after 4 years and graduating from art school, I knew I had to go on and to become an architect. I was blessed. I was able to receive a fairly significant scholarship to Cornell University, College of Architecture, Art and Planning. I continued to work summer breaks in construction through that time. Here at Cornell, I received my professional degree, and shortly afterward passed my license exams. After 8 years in school, all I wanted to do was find a job, but luckily I found myself at one of the largest Philadelphia architectural and engineering firms, where I started working in their largest market sector, which was healthcare, doing hospital work. Did that for a few years. But I had the opportunity while I was there to start to work on retirement community projects, or CCRCs. These projects I found were even more interesting to me than the healthcare projects because they included multiple building types and campus planning. So for an example, a CCRC, as they were called at the time, it includes healthcare. You have nursing and assisted living. It also includes residential, which I thought I would enjoy. And also the community centers. The community centers include things like restaurants, dining, and spa, and fitness centers, and swimming pools, and theaters. So it really created an opportunity for me that would enable me as an architect to explore all sorts of different building types and give me something to specialize in. But what I found, because of the influencers, the people I met, the mentors, was that senior living was full of people that were very dedicated and passionate about their work. And that to me was extremely infectious. So in addition to my work every day at Spiesel, I also have been involved in many other senior living organization activities. For one of them, which I have been working with, is the Facility Guidelines Institute, and particularly on the residential health care, which includes nursing and assisted living. I've also been active with my architects organization, the Aia Design for Aging, on their advisory group. This is a group that includes a juried competition and book of innovation and insights that showcases facilities representing advancements in environments for senior living. One of my observations by spending a lot of time in nursing homes through my career has led me to develop a sink top, and which I received a patent for, that includes hand grips built into it. Again, it's one of those things when you find yourself visiting many nursing homes. Another effort of mine that I've worked on for many years in different formats is participating in writing for a white paper on accessibility standards for toileting and showering. Here's where I was able to meet a number of colleagues, John Sanford out of Georgia Tech, who did a lot of the studies that led us to be able to consider changes to the International Code Council and US Access Board for making transfers in toileting and bathing. And a lot of other researchers in environments for older adults. Great inspiration that I found through working in some of these other activities. Throughout my career, I spent a lot of time in nursing homes. As I mentioned, it was actually an occupational therapist that had once pointed out to me how difficult it is, or could be, where you have a sink location that is adjacent to a wall, or in some cases, how someone moves around through showering. So it was these type of meetings and introductions with allied professionals in the field where I really learned a lot about what goes on in a nursing home that certainly wasn't taught in architectural school. As one of the examples that someone pointed out was how difficult it was to get up to a sink when that sink is up against the wall. This arrangement, although it meets the code, really doesn't work for older folks that have frail and limited upper body strength. So in my practice, I've learned that it's important to design sync going beyond the code where it's not up against the wall, and at least move it away from the wall to make it much easier to move up to. As I mentioned, one of the organizations I've been working with is the Facility Guidelines Institute. Been involved with the FGI. I was on the 2018 edition, working with experts in looking at bariatrics, and bariatrics became a new addition to the FGI guidelines in 2018. We've just completed the 2022 edition, and I've worked here on the residential health guidelines revision committee and some of the subcommittees, including the benefit cost committee. Also, part of the FGI is the emergency conditions committee. The FGI is an independent, if you haven't heard of the FGI, is an independent, not-for-profit organization dedicated to developing guidance for planning, design, construction, hospitals, outpatient facilities, and residential healthcare and support facilities. I, of course, specialized and focused on my activities on the residential healthcare guidelines. Again, coming out in about a month. These are the guidelines that will be used in many states across the country. The mission of the FGI is to establish and promote consensus-based guidelines and publications. These are advised by research, all to advance the quality of healthcare. This is a map of state organizations that have adopted the FGI books, specific chapters or specific editions of the books, depending on legislative cycles. Department of Health, Social Services, Health and Human Services, and other agencies have adopted portions of some of these books. But participating in this organization has given me a better understanding in caring for seniors across the country, from rural areas to urban areas. It's also given me a great opportunity to meet people involved in senior living. As part of the FGI is made up of a diverse member distribution. These are care providers, researchers, architects, authorities having jurisdiction, as we shortly call them, AHJs, and so on. So there's a great opportunity when we work outside of our day-to-day jobs and get involved in these type of activities to really understand what people are experiencing in across the country and in different socioeconomic areas of the country. So I found these real fulfillment in involvement in these kind of organizations, knowing that the objectives are to improve the lives of seniors. I do have to admit that I've always wanted to please my elders, particularly my father. There was never a greater way to please my father than doing a painting of your father, his brothers, my uncles, and his friends that he grew up with. This painting now hangs in a church in my father's hometown in Italy. I want to thank you. There are common motives that those that work and volunteer in senior living field have. And that is centered on improving the lives of people that use these facilities and the philosophy of care, or philosophy called person-centered care. Compared to so many industries that people work in, I found that senior living people are extremely mission driven. And I found that there is no better group of people to be a part of. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, Quinn, so much. That was so informative. And I really want to thank you on behalf of the rest of the folks and folks who will be tuning in to just learn about your career path and everything that you shared. I have questions, but I'm gonna encourage us all to hold them because we do have a Q&A portion after all of our speakers have had a chance to share their work with you. So Quinn, thank you so much. And please stick around and we'll definitely be asking some questions about your work. And thank you, Dr. Baylock, for gearing it right up. Thank you so much. Go for it.
Hold on one second. I realized I just shared the wrong screen, so let me stop sharing.
Love them, but they add complexity.
There we go. Can you see it?
We can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Quinn. I always appreciate an architect's perspective, and thanks for the head nod to occupational therapy. That just made my day. So I'm very excited about the work that you do, and you're also a really talented artist. So thanks for sharing that. So my name is Emily Baylock. I am an assistant professor in the brand new inaugural doctoral program for occupational therapy at Rutgers. So very happy to be here, share a little bit about occupational therapy, particularly with older adults. And I'll share a little bit about what we are doing at the doctoral program as well. Also, I do want to point out, particularly since I'm following an architect, that this other credential here, this ECHM, is an executive certification in home modifications. So working closely with people in that industry is really critical for us. So occupational therapy, what we do is we maximize the health and the well-being and quality of life for people, populations, communities, and groups through effective solutions that really facilitate participation in everyday living. And that word, occupational therapy, some people are a bit perplexed by it because we have come to know that word occupation to mean our job. But really, occupation stems from the word, occupational therapy stems from the word occupation, which means all the things that you do in your life that occupy your time. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that also. And this image here is the students at the OTD program participating in something called car fit training. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So some of the things that we do is to help people to achieve their everyday occupations, no matter how old they are, whether they have a disability or not. But I'm focusing more on what we do with older adults because that is my area of expertise. We help patients, clients to build or restore their abilities, to prevent things from happening. And we do this through things called an activity analysis or task analysis, where we really are skilled at breaking down what a person is doing and understanding where there might be some troubles and helping them to problem solve their way through addressing those issues. And some of the important areas of occupation that we address are self-care, or what you may have heard of as ADLs, or activities of daily living, taking care of other people, taking care of your home, going out into the community, doing shopping, things like that, which are known as IADLs, or instrumental activities of daily living. And those are sort of an extension of the self, an extension of the home or the community, those sorts of things. We also work on health management, issues with work or school, rest and sleep, and then leisure and socialization. So any of these areas we can help people with, which is why I think some people might be confused about what OT does, because it looks so different for every individual, almost as unique as each individual is. And so when we provide services, we begin with an evaluation or an assessment of a client, and that can be done in a number of different ways. We have lots of different assessments depending on the needs of the clients. And we always start with something called an occupational profile, which is really this holistic understanding of a person and what it is that matters to them, not what's the matter with them, but what matters to them. And so some of the things that we do is develop treatment programs where we really address certain goals that are meaningful to the client. Those can be things like eating or bathing, all the way through working a computer to managing a budget. We do comprehensive home evaluations or job site evaluations. As I mentioned, the certification in home modifications, and there's a number of those. I happen to have the ECHM, but there's also CAPS and a number of other home modification kinds of certificates. We also do, as I mentioned, these assessments where we look at a person's performance abilities, and we also really look at the environment. So I mean, this little Venn diagram down here, this is actually one of our theories that we use called PEO, the person, the environment, and the occupation. And we really look very closely at the skills of each individual, the environment in which they need to conduct whatever it is that's meaningful to them, or their occupation. And so it's really a kind of an intersection and a balance of all of those things that really enables people to perform and do the things that are meaningful to them. We also provide guidance and training to caregivers as well. And we keep meticulous records for goals and progress notes and treatment plans so that we can measure whether or not a person is making progress, so we can make adjustments to those treatment plans. And so that we can also make sure that once we do discharge somebody, that, or a group or population, that they have the skills and tools available to continue with a plan, and they don't just regress because we aren't there. It's a great job. OT is a great job for anybody that is interested in caring for others. The Department of Labor has identified occupational therapy as a very fast-growing profession. These are some of the statistics. I will provide this PowerPoint to Lauren to share with you all. So if you want to take a closer look at that, you can see you're not going to be getting filthy rich, but you certainly can make a really nice living being an occupational therapist. And I can attest that it does not get boring ever. So as I mentioned, some of the basic things that we do, or specific examples, are things like helping people with their bathing, dressing, and eating, grocery shopping, driving, cooking. And what we do is to engineer or make this match between what somebody wants to do, needs to do, and what their current abilities are. OT, as I mentioned, can look very different depending on the issues that a client presents with. So it could be related to mental health, physical or emotional health, or developmental issues. And it can also vary depending on a diagnosis that somebody might carry, such as Alzheimer's disease or dementia, low vision issues, Parkinson's disease, COPD, which is a chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, so issues with the lungs. Now COVID long haulers, really helping people with their energy conservation to be able to do those meaningful and important tasks while conserving their energy, for example. Loss of a limb or hand injuries, arthritis, chronic pain, as well as just addressing any normal age-related changes, in addition to whatever might be going on with someone. So occupational therapists can work in a number of different settings. About half of OTs work in clinics or hospitals, but we also work in nursing homes, physicians' offices, through home health services, professors, as I am, teaching other people how to do the work of OT. We spend a lot of time on our feet, so, you know, I gotta have good footwear. And we do a lot of problem solving is a big part of what we do. This comes from the American Occupational Therapy Association. I just wanted to highlight some of those areas. These are the percentage of occupational therapists on the right that work in those settings. And then OTA is another opportunity to become an occupational therapist as an occupational therapy assistant. And Rutgers is unique enough to actually have an OTA program as well, which is just a phenomenal fit for some individuals with less. It offers an opportunity for less schooling. So things in the community, as I mentioned, the car fit training. So just as we look at an environment, a physical environment like somebody's home or someone's community, we can also look at their vehicle and help people to make changes in their vehicle so that their driving can be maintained and can be as safe as possible. Sometimes people aren't able to see over the wheel, things like that, or maybe have problems with their shoulder or arthritis, where putting on a seatbelt can be really painful or difficult. And so we can address those issues as well. And so CarFit is a really great community program that I'm bringing to Rutgers, and that we will be bringing to the community surrounding Rutgers to help older adults to maintain their independence in driving. Additionally, we can work in outpatient facilities, addressing all of those ADLs, IADLs, et cetera, that I had previously mentioned, in home health in the hospital, long-term care, and then with also mental health and a number of different innovative areas. This is some of the information about the education for graduate level education. We do not have a master's program at Rutgers University, but we do have a doctoral program. And so a doctoral program would do all of the things that a master's program would do. But then in addition to that, we do something called a Capstone Project, which is essentially participating in some kind of research that's related to leadership or policy development, theory development, advocacy, education, et cetera. You're required to be board certified. You have to pass a comprehensive examination after your education, of course, passing all of your courses, participating in field work, which means actually going out and serving clients in a variety of different settings. We have, I believe it's 4 level 1, which is 1 day a week, and then 2 level 2s, which is 12 weeks of working essentially full time. And then, of course, the capstone experiential. I'm not going to get too much into our program in the interest of time, but I do want to highlight that one of the things that we're trying to do here at Rutgers is bring occupational therapy back to our roots. We stemmed from World War II after many soldiers were coming home injured and really needed something important, meaningful to help them to engage in their daily life activities. And a lot of that really went into the community and into mental health. And so we are hoping that our students can have the skills, they will have the skills to work in these community settings to sort of push into some other areas, to push into preventative areas, because that is so critical with this aging population right now, that we do some more preventative work and do some more community work. So as I mentioned, I will provide this information. So if you're interested in learning more about the OT program at Rutgers, you can join us in a virtual open house. You can send us an email. So I'll get that information to Lauren. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Baylock. Thank you so much. It's so fascinating to learn everything that you shared, and especially how long occupational therapy has existed as a profession since World War II. I did not know that. It's fascinating.
Yeah, we celebrated our 100 years in 2017.
Wow, that's really amazing to think of, just the way that the field has evolved and how meaningful it is. And I really look forward to hearing more about the wonderful work you're doing at the school. And thank you so much for joining us. Peter, we invite you to go ahead and share.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me set up. Okay.
Yes.
You guys
can
can see
your
it?
screen.
All right, I'm gonna
Yes.
do a slideshow so you guys can't see all my secrets behind it. Okay, Lauren, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to have speaking engagements like this. Anytime I can share a little bit about Upside Home, and especially my story, it provides me a little bit of joy, because this is super personal for me and my partner Jake and everybody that we get involved with. It means a lot to us. So my name is Peter Badgley. I'm founder and COO of Upside Home. We are a company that was founded about 2 years ago. And like I just mentioned, this was founded on a personal need. Both my partner, Jake Rossing, and I, we went through it with our grandparents, and now we're going through it with our parents. And we're looking to create this new category of senior living that's never existed before. And our tagline, I don't want to be too cliche, but Upside Home, we are building the biggest senior living community in the world without laying a single brick. And we believe we're going to do it. Right now, we are only operating in South Florida, so Miami-Dade County, Broward County, Palm Beach County. So if people who are not familiar with South Florida, from Miami to West Palm Beach right now. How did a person like myself get into this field? I got a degree in finance from Providence College, and I did what everybody else, most of my classmates and most of my friends I grew up in New Jersey. I went to school in Northeast. We all went to New York City. We got a job in Wall Street, worked as a backroom analyst, and just started crunching numbers all day. I'm like, you know, I'm in this rat race. Maybe this isn't for me. I want to do something that is mission driven. I want to do something that's going to make a difference. it took me a little bit to get there. I can probably write a whole book and a whole memoir of how I got to Upside Home, but to kind of cut it short in essence of time, my wife now, Erica, and I, we packed up our bags and we moved to South Florida. And I just took a measly little technology sales job. Somebody told me, Peter, why don't you try getting the sales? It's good business acumen. You build a nice foundation and you can kind of go into multiple paths of where you get to pick and choose. Where do you want to go? You get to build it. And I'm like, okay. So I took this little job down here in South Florida selling technology. And it's funny how life works sometimes. I met my now founder, my partner and founder, Jake Rothstein, who was the ex-founder of Papa, another South Florida-based company down here in Miami that provides companionship visits to older adults. And working with Jake at this job and working at the back ends of Papa, when I met Jake, Papa was just a couple of employees, a couple of visits a day in South Florida. Now they're operating all 50 states across the whole country. And I got to see the back end works of how Papa operated. I got insight to the market of Papa, and I got to work with Jake. And as Jake was building Papa, he goes, I got this other idea. I'm like, okay, Jake, tell me about this idea. And he starts pitching me the early days of Upside Home. And I'm like, gosh, okay, so like you tell me a little bit about your family, you tell me about this market, you're talking about housing. I'm gonna get into the market a little bit later. He goes, something needs to change here. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. So he starts telling me more. And as he's going through it, everything he's telling me, I'm going through with my grandparents, trying as they enter this next stage. My grandma's trying to look for her next place, and we're looking at different senior living options, and she just wasn't ready yet. And Jake was going the same thing with his grandparents. And I'm like, they can't be alone. So we're in this back end conference room and we start making what Upside Home is. And we start talking about this market, and we talk about how big the market is. And I think we got a lot of learnings from his previous company, Papa. And then we started doing some research on the housing market and just to see how tremendous this opportunity is and how much of a difference an idea like ours and what we're building can do to this population. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen like the market with the housing issue with older adults. And we found, it's been surveyed that 90% of the people say they want to age in place, and only 10% of the people go into traditional senior living. So that 90% that say they want to age in place, is it the right place? And we ask ourselves time and time again, and I know Dr. Kozlov's on the call. We're very close working with Dr. Kozlov on providing this option for people. And I think the most exciting part is of how big this opportunity is, but then we also go back to how big of a problem it is. So Upside Home, we know that today's options are limited to one, you can live alone, just like our grandparents were. But we know that a person like my grandma who lost her husband years ago, she's lonely. And the house that she was living in, especially in New Jersey, was a 1920s colonial 2-story home, and going up downstairs maybe wasn't as practical. So, okay, that's a lot. It's not practical. The roof on the house was fading away, and those leaks become costly. So it's difficult to maintain a house, and it's expensive. The other options were institutional. Some of these institutional livings, they're pricey, especially in the market that we're in South Florida. I mean, you're talking about $6,000, $10,000, $15,000 a month. With my upbringing, that's just not feasible for, unfortunately, for my parents and for many other people living in America. And then there's the stigma. As much as we're doing our best to create a better environment in senior living, like there still is this stigma, and we saw it with my own grandparents. We tour a couple of areas, and they're beautiful. I mean, like you talk about, there's a lot of nice stuff that goes into these communities, but they just weren't ready yet. They just like, this is not for me yet. And we're building this option. There's always going to be a need for assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing centers. But what about my grandparents that are still active, they're still driving, they're still doing activities, and they just don't feel like they're ready for that institutional living yet. So we felt that it's a very one-size-fits-all approach for today's institutional living. So how can we provide some more flexibility? And then the third option was moving the family. I love my grandparents to death. I will do anything for them. But for many older, for adult children that are taking on this step, maybe it's just not feasible to have our loved ones move in with us as we're raising our own kids. Or maybe we don't have the room for them. Maybe we don't have the means to care for them. So today's options, as I go back to it, we felt were just a bit limited, and like, okay, so let's create Upside Home. So what is Upside Home? Very simply, we are managed housing. We add some services, we add community, and we create this engagement. So right now in South Florida, we have over 480 properties to work with, and these properties are just regular multi-generational people of all ages. They have all the nice amenities. And we partner with these communities that meet our very curated, specific quality standards to making sure that people are aging in the right place. We add this basic layer of services. We talk about the IADLs. So their support, we add for some safety services. They need some modifications to go into, if they need some grab bars in the showers or some handrails. We go back in those communities to make sure those are retrofitted. And then we provide them this community. Lots of these buildings have this community center of different games and activities downstairs in the community. What about leveraging what already exists with different YMCAs or JCCs or other local community centers? How can we create this experience that they would get in traditional senior living, but put this in this regular apartment building and almost make it like senior living in disguise? You would never know that your neighbor next door is maybe getting these services from Upside Home, which kind of alleviates the stigma of maybe people not wanting to take that step, but we give them this beautiful apartment with these services that are geared towards them. And it's customized. It's not one size fits all. If you don't need shower grab bars, we're not going to give you shower grab bars. If you don't want meals, you don't have to get meals. So we create this whole host of, we create this package of only what's important to them. And it varies. We have people living with us that are 59, 69, 50, 60 years old, all the way up until they're 87. And each one of our residents requires something different, and we're able to provide that. And then the best part is engagement. We're this dedicated resource that they come to. So instead of the burden of some adult children, or maybe somebody doesn't have the luxury of having an adult child or a resource to go to, we become this resource for all our members. This person can help with a wide variety of different services that I just mentioned. So Upside Home's model, we're going to support safety, affordability, and then we can scale. Yes, we're in Florida now, but this is something that can be repeated in every single major city, every single area in the United States. We're proven that disruption can be big in this market, and just in general. We're comparing ourselves, I love to compare ourselves, and I think we'll be there, but Uber and Airbnb. So Uber did it to the cab service. Airbnb did to the hotel industry. We want to do it to the senior living industry. What Airbnb did to Hilton, we want to do it to the Brookdales. And I think we have the market opportunity to do so. We have, of course, we've proven it here in South Florida, but there's 12, I think it's now 12,000 people a day turning 65. And there's not enough options. So if we can provide this option for people, we're excited to. So we're expanding, we're hiring. We just recently closed on a round of fundraising, and we're looking to make an impact. I mentioned this before, and this is personal for us. Everyone that we bring on our team, it's personal. A lot of us have non-traditional routes. Full disclosure, I'm 29 years old. Maybe wasn't the norm, and most of us, we've all gone through it. An older adult has crossed our paths one point in our life, whether it's a grandparent, whether it's a parent, whether it's a friend, whether it's another loved one. And everybody that we bring on here at Upside Home, it means something. We want to make a difference. And Jake has done it. Papa continues to do it. And we're confident that we're going to be able to do it. And like I mentioned, we're expanding, we're hiring. And again, any chance I get to present in front of people like yourselves and open up this opportunity to make older adults, I guess, like demographic of this occupation sexy, that's what I want to get out here. We want to make a difference, and I'm excited to present to you guys, and open to having conversations.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. It's so exciting to hear about the intersections of housing and tech and innovation and all of the change that is feels like we're on the horizon for such wonderful, amazing things. And all of our fields like intersect and combine between design and occupational therapy that helps inform the design, and then bringing tech and other components in to help support just a new and different way to age, which I think everyone on the call is just like very excited about. So thank you so much, Peter. It's wonderful. We really appreciate that. And we'll have time to ask questions at the end. So please keep them. I have tons of questions. I'm so excited. Thank you so much. And I want to invite Dr. Carpenter, certainly last but not least, to go ahead and start sharing your screen to tell us about your amazing work. Thank you. Yep, we can see it.
All right, you can see my screen, correct? Good. Okay, so well, this is a delight really to follow all of these great speakers and our work, with older adults. And, I think a lot of us have discussed our paths, and it's not been linear. We kind of go this direction, that direction, and then we go back and round and round. And I think that's what you find, throughout your career, is that when you land on something you really love to do, sometimes it takes a different path than what we think it should look like. So it's really fun to be here today to talk with you, along with Quinn and Peter and Emily. So I want to thank you for the introduction and the invitation to be here. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I want to talk with you about my career path in nursing, which includes clinical practice, research, teaching, and leadership in gerontology and palliative care. I'll tell you a little bit about how I chose my career in nursing, some of my early clinical experience, and the research that's informed the program of study that I'm building today. And we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers, so feel free to write some thoughts down as I talk, or write your questions in the chat, and bring up some points of discussion for the end of the presentation today. So as I was preparing this talk, I was thinking about my formal education and training in nursing, and as well as my career path. And I reflected back to my first exposure to the healthcare system as a teen volunteer at Braddock General Hospital in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. And I spent Saturdays delivering mail. This was back when teen volunteers, I'm dating myself, when teen volunteers can do a lot more in the hospital than they allow today. But I used to deliver mail and shuffle paperwork and fill water pitchers to patients in the hospital. And it was really there that I developed a deep respect for the hospital staff as I watched them care for patients, and especially the nurses. So it was natural for me to choose nursing whenever I arrived at Penn State for my undergraduate education. And after obtaining my bachelor's of science in nursing, I moved to Seattle, and I started my professional career at Swedish Medical Center, caring for people with serious illness, namely HIV, AIDS, and advanced cancer. And after a couple of years, I realized that I wanted to obtain advanced education in nursing and become an advanced practice nurse as a nurse practitioner. So I had moved to Georgia at that time, and I started my master's degree at Emory University. And during that time, I also worked as a nurse on a neurological and neurosurgical floor, and then switched to working in a neurological clinic as a research nurse. And it was during that time that I gained experience coordinating clinical trials, developing protocols, and really got exposed to research and all the activities that occur in research. And I really enjoyed it. At that point, for financial reasons and personal reasons, I was engaged to my husband at the time. He was at the Medical College of Georgia in medical school, and I moved. I finished my graduate program at the Medical College of Georgia, and I continued my work there as a research nurse. And then in a movement disorders clinic. And I created, after I finished my master's, I created a position as a research nurse practitioner to continue the work that I'd been doing within that department, but was able to practice at an advanced level as a nurse, being able to bill for services. At the time, working with individuals with Parkinson's and other movement disorders who had deep brain stimulators. So I was able to do a lot of the work I enjoyed clinically, as well as the research that I enjoyed. But life has its twists and turns, and my husband finished medical school, and he ended up doing residency in Delaware. And so we decided to obviously move to that area, and I stayed home for a couple of years while we had our first 2 children. And then I returned to work as a nurse practitioner with Evercare, which really doesn't exist as much anymore. It's Optum now, which is owned by United Health Group. And so a lot of folks in nursing homes are familiar with Optum. So, and actually now Optum has products throughout, Medicare Advantage products throughout different settings. This was where, when I took this position as a primary care nurse practitioner in nursing homes, I really developed a deep interest in geriatrics and palliative care. And when I looked back, when I thought back about my career, I started really working with older adults with serious illness straight out of nursing school, my bachelor's program. And then when I moved, even in neurological care and neurosurgical care, many people are living with serious illness, neurocognitive disorders, illnesses that don't always have a cure and may in fact have a trajectory that continues to worsen over time. And I was able to link all these experiences and really pull it into this main interest, really, where I realized that it was geriatrics and palliative care that I wanted to focus. Palliative care is an extra layer of support for people with serious illness. A lot of people equate it with hospice and end-of-life care, but it's not the same. All hospice care is palliative care, but not all palliative care is hospice care. I hope that makes sense, and I can explain it more as we move along. So in 2006, it was during this time where I tell you I developed a deep interest in geriatrics and palliative care, but I really developed a passion in caring for older adults. I found the complexity of managing multiple conditions was challenging. Educating the nursing staff who I worked with was rewarding, and I found I was able to make a substantial difference in the residents' lives that I worked with. And one was particularly memorable because after several discussions regarding goals of care and the benefits and burdens of several life-sustaining treatments, she and her family decided on supportive and comfort care and to really live out the remainder of her life in the nursing home. And when she died, I was surprised to see the family had thanked me by name in her obituary. And as a result of these experiences and several others, namely receiving thank you notes from residents, of families, family members of residents, and being nominated for clinical practice awards, I realized that while I could make a positive impact on the end-of-life care for individual nursing home residents, to really have a broad impact on the quality of care for seriously ill older adults in nursing homes, I needed to seek doctoral preparation and develop a program of research that focused on studying, developing, implementing palliative care for seriously ill nursing home residents. So this took me to the University of Utah. And throughout, so see, it doesn't always like happen in one city and one place. You move from place to place. And throughout my PhD preparation, I completed rigorous coursework in research design, methods, and analysis at the University of Utah College of Nursing. And part of the reason I ended up at the University of Utah was because they had a Hartford Center of Geriatric Nursing Excellence where they really had focused on admitting 2 cohorts of nurse scientists focused on gerontology. So that was the focus of my program. And so I was able to obtain independent competitive funding for my dissertation research. I gained proficiency in qualitative research methods, and I was able to conduct research with interdisciplinary teams, all focused on gerontology and palliative care, which was also my interest. So after I finished my doctoral work, I continued to build my research skill set in gerontology and palliative care as a national VA postdoctoral nursing research fellow. And the goals of that fellowship were to expand my research skill set into quantitative methodologies and implementation science related to geriatric palliative care. And because one of my career goals also is to be an independent nurse scientist and clinical trialist, I recognize that I need additional training in intervention development and clinical trials. So I, at the time, was also at the University of Pennsylvania after I finished my postdoc, and I was able to obtain a career development award that funded me for 3 years to gain that specific training around clinical trials and intervention development, which then took me to the University of Maryland, where I am now as a faculty member. I'm a tenure track researcher, nurse scientist with a federally funded program of research that focuses on implementing high quality serious illness care for older adults in nursing homes. And so this is the vision for what I have for my career. And it's to develop and test effective nursing home delivery models of palliative care for adults with older adults with serious illness, and be an expert and leader in geriatric palliative care research. So you see how these all intersect. None of it really can stand alone. Everything influences, my research influences how I provide education and mentorship, which my practice also influences that as well, but my research influences my practice, but my practice is what's informed my research program. So it's kind of interesting how when you find something that you love to do, you're able to integrate it all into one. And so, what I want to share with you, actually, I'm going to go back on one. Let me see if I can go back. What I also want to talk about, and Quinn reminded me of this, is that, your career encompasses so many areas. So I have a research program that's federally funded, and I conduct clinical trials and do some implementation science work with the VA. But I also mentor students, so, and teach students. So many of my PhD students are involved with my research. And as I mentioned, I still, maintain an active clinical practice. I'm a nurse practitioner with a focus in palliative care. So I actually provide palliative care consultations to older adults in nursing homes. So I'm able to maintain that practice too. So that's what I'm talking about, where this is all like intermingled. And then, as far as leadership is concerned, my goal is to be a leader in geriatric palliative care. And so through my research program, I'm recognized as a leader. Through mentoring and advising, I'm promoting my leadership. And then through my practice, I'm also a leader. And one of the things I think about is that as a PhD prepared nurse, I can walk into many settings and I can tell people all the things I know about nursing homes and about palliative care through my research, through my scholarship, but I can't gain respect and appreciation from staff that I collaborate with and I partner with until they know that I have them, the residents and the family's best interests at heart. And when I approach nursing homes for research participation, partnerships and participation, I always make it clear why I'm doing what I do, what has led me down my path, why why this is my area of interest. And we often discuss and share challenges that we encounter, both on, me as a researcher and them as clinicians. And we really are able to gain authentic trust and meaningful relationships through that. And so what I always, think about with students that I talk to and work with is that you really have to, find the work that you love to do, that you actually don't even call it work sometimes, because it's your vision, it's your mission, it's what you want to do with your career. And, I feel really fortunate because I feel that I've been able to do that. It hasn't been always a clear path. And it's round and round. And I think I definitely beat Peter in the age numbers there, but it's always, to land on what you love to do is really the most important thing. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow us to have some question and answer time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Carpenter, and to all the wonderful speakers. I've learned so much. I know there are others who would like to jump in and ask some questions as well, but I just want to emphasize something that you mentioned, Dr. Carpenter, that always rings true to me as well as a licensed social worker and a faculty member and someone who's always from the start, from my first day at my MSW program, worked with older adults. And it's an opportunity to lead. Some of us may be sitting in this room virtually and not sure, where or what subpopulation or what type of work we're doing, but we may become excited about an opportunity to innovate, to create change, to lead, to embark on social change. And I really feel like so passionately about the opportunities that you've all mentioned in your careers, where you've gone, where you are now, and where, you know, students watching or that are in the room now, you know, the opportunities are out there. So with that, I thank you all again so much. And I just want to open it up to anyone who might have a question for our speakers today. And I'll check the chat too. Great, just lots of love in the chat for the quote, Dr. Carpenter. Any questions for our speakers?
Lauren, I had a question for Peter and maybe all of the panelists. One of the issues that we're dealing with in almost every aspect of life is labor shortages. I had recently put together we do an annual conference, and we had asked our usual attendees to submit what some of their top subjects would be. And one of the top subjects is dealing with is labor issues, particularly for staffing in nursing homes or retirement communities, or even in home care. So my question is, and I know how home care is faced with the difficulty of my own mother right now, trying to find help in the homes, is how Peter, you expect to be able to compete. I'd love, it's hard enough for those that have nursing homes to compete with hospitals and who pay higher salaries, how we all can compete with a really limited and probably a progressively limited labor staff in this country.
Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, this is one of like the toughest markets to operate in right now. And I think we're all feeling it in terms of the shortages. And I think what's benefited us to date is, in terms of like what our boots on the ground are to help a lot of our members, is tapping into PAPA. And the market that they've been able to generate with the gig workers and go through their rigorous tests to making sure that they can deal with older adults. And I think tapping into PAPA has helped us tremendously to not only work in this market, but then to also expand into future markets. So that's helped us big time. In terms of our own staff, and us internally, yeah, it's a tough market, and doing whatever we can to compete and attract talent will always continue to be a challenge, but it's just something that we're working towards. Not sure if that answered your question. No.
Yeah, you know, Quinn, I'll just mention to you, you know, all of my clinical trials are in nursing homes, and so for 2 years we've been on pause. And so COVID was one pandemic. COVID's the pandemic. The next crisis is the staffing shortage. I mean, it is so hard for me to ask nursing homes to do more than they're doing when they're caring for residents, and the scrutiny, you know, what the you know, the attention that was placed on nursing homes during the pandemic when they were not always given the resources, you know, that they needed, which, you know, I know we're being recorded, but I'm very passionate about this issue that, you know, we did not equip nursing homes with what they needed to take good care of the residents. So that said, there are staff members in nursing homes that can get paid more at Amazon. And so, you know what I mean? Like, that is a big problem. And unless we're working so that folks in these direct care working jobs have a living wage that they can care for their family. And this is, I think, the social responsibility a little bit, Lauren, that you talked about. And until we're working toward that, I mean, that is a huge issue. And older adults need the high quality care that they can get in the hospital, in other, you know, other areas. I don't know that answers your question either, but I just think we all have a responsibility to be working toward the change so that individuals who are working with older adults are making a wage that is a livable wage.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that too, you know, these roles are traditionally filled by women as caregiving roles, and so and historically underpaid, and something has to be done about that, because no longer are women staying at home, but we are in the workforce. And so there's this very interesting changing dynamic where these historical kinds of things that were happening, we could care for, you know, our older parent because you were already home. That doesn't exist anymore. Not to mention that baby boomers are also less likely to have children at all. So having these sort of naturally occurring retirement communities, these village communities, these kinds of things that Peter, that you are developing, I think are going to be really critical for the future, and of course, a livable wage.
One of the things I recently learned on this subject was from a presentation I just heard, and really the focus of it, because if you just look at it from the number standpoint, there just aren't going to be enough people, workforce people. And so this presentation that I'd seen, it focused on those that are in businesses that are going to reliant on attracting labor force, really have to work on their own culture. And so much of the presentation was about creating workplace culture, diversity, equity, inclusion. And these are the things that, you know, those of us that want to survive in this profession really have to focus on in order to be the best in a competitive world.
And Quinn, I just also wanted to add too that, you know, I didn't talk about my research today at all when I was talking about occupational therapy, but the research that I do is within the communities. And, you know, we have a responsibility as community members to really change the way that we interact and look at older adults and set up our communities, because you're right, we don't have enough workers. And so we need to kind of rally together as a village style model where we're creating respect, where we're creating opportunities for civic engagement, where we're creating opportunities for people to stay in their homes, you know, or to Peter's point, the place that they want to age in for as long as possible, and potentially avoid institutionalization, or at least deter institutionalization. And sometimes, as I found in my research, that can be something as simple as having support for your lawn getting mowed or your trash cans being taken in. And sometimes those are the reasons people go into institutions. And as a community, we can really work together and develop programs to change that, particularly, I think the individuals that are here today. There's a study that I mentioned to some of you called the Capable Study. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, but it's the work between nursing, occupational therapy, and then a handy person team, and really bringing you know, sort of home modification and medical programming to people so that they can age in place.
You know, I'm not a panelist, but hi, Alyssa Kozlov. I'm a clinical psychologist and part of this team, I guess. But, you know, something that I'm hearing is this tension between, do we lean into the gig economy, which is something that Papa has been able to do to provide trained lay people as companions that certain Medicare Advantage programs will cover, which fills in a really important gap. But then on the other hand, I hear Dr. Carpenter talking about, but we also need to work harder to ensure that the full-time, round-the-clock staffing needs of nursing homes and hospitals have what they need and are being paid affordably. And I think there's this really big tension right now of who's like, what version of work is going to win in this country? Do we give in to the gig economy? Do we give in, you know, an Uber driver can make more money than a home health aide right now. And the home health aide, like we need to do something to make it more appealing and attractive to go into this kind of direct service research or direct services clinical work. Because you know, I don't think that the VNAs and the home health aid major organizations can compete with the kinds of benefits that Amazon and Uber and all of these other, you know, either full-time or gig economy employers can offer. So the question is, where can we innovate? How can we keep up? Because I think that we can't just expect mostly women. So I have a colleague who does a lot of research with the home health aid workforce, and it's mostly women. It's mostly women of color. They have the most workplace stress of any like environment because they don't have colleagues, right? They're going into the home, providing care by themselves, are abused by family members of the patient, sometimes abused by the patient, right? Like it's not a good work environment. And it is, we have to figure out something because this is not a sustainable trajectory that we're on to help older adults age well, age in their home, age in a nursing home, right? We're not doing well. And I think the pandemic just revealed all of the massive gaps in how we care for the carers.
And I just can't help but, yeah, I just can't help but think about how I'm hoping that everyone who's a student on the call and anyone who's listening in the future to this recording is feeling inspired to create that change. Because I would hope, Dr. Kozlov, thank you, that both of these worlds can exist where we can tap into both workforces, where we can train individuals who may be interested in these industries to step in and step out appropriately and deliver good service and good care to older community members, in addition to whatever work they or other life roles that they may be engaging in. And then also to support those who are 24/7 or, 9 to 5, 5 days a week or whatever, fully enthralled and fully committed to working in the fields and industries with older adults. And I can just add, as a nursing home social worker, former nursing home social worker, I've had many students, and I've been one myself, where these industries, as Dr. Carpenter was saying, they are, unfortunately not as well supported as we'd like them to be. They're not as lucrative as they should be, for folks in my industry. And, we have to really think about how much it costs to go to nursing school, to go to architect school, to go to doctor school, to go to social work school. And we're so excited and delighted to have more in these different fields. But at the end of the day, if the really wonderful work they're doing is not paying down those student loan debts, we can't expect these individuals to stay in these roles either. And I think about that quite often. And Myrta added in the chat, thinking about legislation. I just want to ask Myrta, can you elaborate to that comment?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I'm very interested in the Alzheimer's organization, the local one, Alzheimer's New Jersey. And, we're always talking about advocating and, writing to Congresswoman to pass legislation for this or that. We just recently lost something about Medicare covering like a special treatment for Alzheimer's patients. So I was just thinking about the labor force for older populations and how, I don't know what legislation is out there, but when you mentioned, what are the students going to do? Like, it just made me think of that, like, getting involved in that, more of like a policy and to it, even though I'm not policy.
I can speak to that a little bit. So that's actually the sort of the point of my research, is to demonstrate the ways with which communities can provide opportunities and services to older adults that ultimately is funded through Medicare. I specifically looked at suburban communities, which is a little bit of a lot of the research is already looking at urban communities and rural communities, and they're very different from how a suburban community would operate. But what is unique to middle income suburban communities is that older adults, oftentimes they're full homeowners, at least, their wealth is tied up within the home in which they dwell. And in order to access that money, if something should happen, they have to liquidate their asset or sell their home. And it's a really demeaning process, right? You work your whole life, you are able to have a home, and then you have to have it taken away in order to get the care that you need. And so my hope is that my research will demonstrate why we need policies, why we need funding streams directly from the government to come to communities to support these kinds of programming, to support preventative care, to demonstrate that it actually does work. And advocacy, Marita, I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right, is such a huge piece of it, and such a huge piece of what the students, at least in the occupational therapy doctoral program, will be doing in terms of advocacy right on the hill. We're going to go. And so, but something as simple as writing is huge. I mean, that these people are elected officials, right? They're there to serve us and to serve what our interests are. And writing a letter is a really critical way to show what's important to you.
I have a quick question. It's Anita. Here, I want to question, this will tie in. I'm sorry I don't have my camera on. I'm not in where I'm usually. But this follows in. I have a question for Peter. I would like to know a little, I think what you're doing is fantastic. I think the process, but are you going to be looking at measuring some outcomes? Even if it's just satisfaction, or looking at how long they're in this arrangement with you before they have to move on to the next steps, So I wonder if you're going to be, if that's on your horizon before you move on to other places.
Of course it is. I think that's a major component to what we're doing at Upside Home. And I see Dr. Kozlov smiling over there. I'm sure she can add her 2 cents to it as well. But multiple facets of the business. That's exactly what we're thinking about on a daily basis. That's going to help us get to the next steps. It's going to help us expand, and it's going to help us start measuring some outcomes of all our members. And it's going to help us learn, but it's also going to help families themselves learn, and then hopefully maybe some insurance companies. So it's a constant evaluation. And maybe Dr. Kozlov, I know maybe you can add to that.
Yeah. So what I didn't disclose is that I'm acting as their chief scientific officer. So research. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So research is integral to our mission. Otherwise, they wouldn't have brought me on. And I give a lot of credit to the founders, to Peter and Jake, because they care. They're not chasing the dollars, they're chasing the life improvements. And so they brought me on really early to think through how we can ensure that, I'm loving the love emojis from everyone. Thank you. We're thinking through how we can make sure that we're not just offering a product, we're offering an evidence-based, fully integrated solution. And we're doing it because it's the right thing to do, but we're also doing, we're doing it because we want to tap into the Medicare market, and Medicare is not going to do anything without the data that shows that what we're doing is moving the needle. So we are integrating a research-backed approach and collecting our own outcomes throughout every step of the process. That's why I'm there. That's the only reason they want me around.
Great, thank you. Guess who's going to be speaking to my students in the fall? You're on the top of my list.
Peter?
No, I'm punting that to you.
Oh, okay, great.
Well, no, because I think this is such an innovative way of thinking. I mean, I've always talked about, NARCs, and I've always talked about, the villages, but I think this is, I guess, the lack of a better word, the next phase, the next step in looking first at the needs of the population and integrating them. And as you said, you got people in their 50s and 60s, and you're integrating them into places to live, and their neighbor may not even know.
Yeah.
Which I think is a big bonus for this idea, and that it shows really how this could be intergenerational, which has always been my big thing. My colleagues know that I call any of the facilities, that I call them senior ghettos, because I think they isolate the population, both they themselves and then from the outside, and losing that plethora of knowledge. So thank you.
No, thank you. That warms my heart. So you're spot on. So thank you.
Lauren, if I could just make a couple of comments, a couple of words that kind of bristled at is, particularly as I have made my career over 30 years, particularly working in industry, designing retirement communities, I mean, from ground up, everywhere from all along the East Coast and Japan as well. The idea of these retirement communities. When I first was introduced to one of the largest providers of retirement communities, which is Kendall Organization, it's a Quaker-based organization based in Pennsylvania. Right now, they're doing a Zen-inspired community in California. Just to give you an idea about where that typology of senior home residence is going. I really fail to believe or consider it an institutional choice. And in fact, if you look at kind of the idea of Zen inspired, it is anything but institutional. I do realize though, and I have found this my whole career, of course, those that can afford CCRCs aren't people like me, middle class, done okay, but it's unlikely that I in my lifetime will be able to afford that kind of living that I've made my put my food on my table with doing. So I do realize it's not for everybody. There is a striving movement to try and create that kind of service and home for middle America and even those that have middle or lower means. There is striving and there is work being done in that, because I think there's also a recognition that the efficiency of putting people in closer proximity together that need services is far outweighs the ability to provide services when people are in their own homes and far apart. I think, you know, there's the desire to, of course, live at home, as most of us all want, and we see that with my mom and everyone else, that they just want to be at home, regardless of better services and actually the chance. My mother was just recently in a personal care home after a rehab visit in a hospital stint, and you know, she was actually perking up. She was actually doing better. And one of the things I found in my early days with Kendall is people actually did better when they went into some of these exclusive retirement communities. In fact, they had to change their percentages because, again, these are insurance policies. They go into these guaranteeing them care. So they expected that the death rate would be at the normal death rate as the population. But what some of the early starters of these retirement communities found, like Kendall, was that they had to change the numbers because people live longer. They weren't isolated at all. They tended to be more socially engaged, and social engagement is one of the three peers of life, of living well, besides some exercise and good diet. But social engagement is just as high. So there is an aspect to, I don't want to call it institutional living, but congregate care, if you want to call it that, that is actually better for people, whether they don't, like my mom, realize it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Quinn. I think that when we get into these conversations, I'm remembering what Dr. Carpenter, who might be joining us by phone right now because she had to transition, but I'm remembering what she shared, and I really do believe this as well, in that a lot of these facilities and industries and long-term care, you know, they're sort of victim to the overarching issue that we have in society, which is ageism. You know, we can have all of these things exist. We can have facilities exist for folks who do thrive better in that setting, who do require that amount of support. We can also have folks aging in place or in the right place. Like, I think these settings, as a social worker, as a clinical social worker, and I think I see heads nodding, we all agree, all of these places should and could, and we'd like them all to exist because of the unique needs that all people present with and the unique levels of access and resources and lived experiences that everyone brings into our offices, right? Into our spaces. But I think that, again, like, the problem that I see is that, like, there's this overarching issue of where is, and as Dr. Baylock said, sort of where is, like, the more legislative support, and as Myrta mentioned, like, larger scale support and funding. There is no reason why we can't fund the facilities and fund special projects like Upside Home, etc. Like, they should all exist, because there are so many people who are aging and living much, much longer than ever before. The truth of the matter is, we're going to need all of it, right? Like, we're just simply going to need all of these different unique services and opportunities. So why not have support for them all?
Lauren, that's such a great point. And in fact, in some of the literature that I was looking at when I was doing my dissertation work, the findings are that when we create these home and community-based services, when we create these opportunities for aging in place, that the people who are in nursing homes actually get better care, and people who really need to be in nursing homes are the ones who actually go there, versus, again, as I mentioned, somebody who simply can't maintain their property, right? And is getting fined continuously. Instead of them going into a nursing home, it's the people who really need that high level of care, and it can improve that quality.
Exactly. So it really does go back to this sort of larger mind shift and narrative shift that we all are striving for, and kind of bringing forth in our work every day. And even just being here, wanting to know more about opportunities that you can consider and how you can think about aging and services that engage with older community or society members, thinking about how you're approaching that. And also, hopefully, reminding yourself that we're all aging every second of every minute of every day. And so this is a lifelong investment. And with that, we're at our time. So I really want to thank, people are having to run to other meetings, and I understand that completely. So I just want to thank all of our presenters, those who are still with us and those who had to drop off, for sharing everything that you did today, your passion, your experiences, and all your wonderful work. For students who are joining us and who are listening, thank you so much for joining as well. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren, for hosting yet another fantastic panel. You are just such a wonderful moderator. So thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baylock. Thank you, Quinn, and everyone here. Really appreciate it. Join us for tomorrow at 6 p.m. We have our last event for Careers in Aging Week, focused on research. So, check out the flyerage. You'll probably get it in an email, or if you haven't already. But thank you so much.
Thanks.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Thank you, Quinn.